Welcome to the Writer Groupie podcast. I'm Kim Smith, the writing guru, bringing you discussions, insights, and insider details on planning, producing, promoting, and profiting as a writer. This is a podcast by writers for writers. You can find out more about Writer Groupie at www.writergroupie.net. And here's the next episode of Writer Groupie. And welcome everybody to episode 71. Tonight my guest is S.C. Hall, and S.C. Hall is a book critic and a writer of some pretty interesting material that I want to chat with him about. Y'all be sure and stay tuned and listen in on this chat with him about what he writes. I have been down sick with a terrible cold that has got me right here. And so I'm going to probably be coughing. I'm probably going to be clearing my throat. I sound terrible. I hope SC talks a lot. Excuse me. See, I told you. SC, welcome to Writer Groupie. I am so happy to have you on the show. I don't think I've ever talked to anybody before. We met at Imaginarium, and I learned that you were a book critic. And we chatted very briefly about that. And to me, I always thought a book critic was a book reviewer, but there's a definite difference there. Tell us about you and tell us about what you do.
Okay, well, first off, I've been in the writing world for about 16 years now, so this is nothing new to me. This is a new area that I'm focusing on. And the difference that people ask, like you've asked, is what's the difference between a critic and a reviewer? And when I read a book, I read for the sole purpose of critiquing the book. I delve into stories, plot holes. I look for something to critique. With a reviewer, a lot of times with reviewer blogs, what I've noticed is they read what they like, and then they post a review that they feel about the book. And for me, as I've said, reviewers get to pick what they read. Critics, not so much.
That's a great way to designate the difference between them. Can you kind of tell us how that process works? I'm trying to figure out which one I am.
Well, it kind of got started by accident, actually, for me. So it's kind of like I'm still learning that process myself. It all kind of started with me, it kind of getting free books out of it, really, to be honest. I told people, hey, look, I'd love to do a review on your book, and so they would give me a book, and I was like, I love this. And so after doing it for a little bit, I realized that critiquing as a writer myself, I look for things that I enjoy about a book that my writing kind of capsulizes as well. And so that's how my process is I get the book, and within possibly a week or two, I'll have it out, the review for the author, and it's really, I just take my time. I'm not trying to fly through the book like normal. I'll take maybe a couple hours on a chapter. I'll reread a chapter if I'm confused about something, and try to find the connection if it's there in the chapter. So again, it's not an exact science. So
Do you look for specific things in books to critique? For example, well, like if you were reading a chapter and it had plausibility issues, that might make you go back and reread it again to see, where it fell apart or whatever. That's almost like an editor's job, isn't it?
In a sense, yeah. So that's kind of what a critic is. It's editing without the purpose of sending it back to be done again. And so it's also just kind of, you're not critiquing the book, so to speak, as you're critiquing the author in a sense, because you're like, this is what they did well. This is where a story came together. This is where In a bad sense, like in a negative critique, I would put, too many plot holes, or it's like there was way too much missing, not enough substance.
I'm
So,
sorry.
you're
Keep,
you're fine. That's
you
why I'm
just
trying
keep
to do as
going.
much talking.
Oh man, I probably should have gotten some water to sip on while we're talking. I apologize. I want to know if someone who is just a really avid reader
Mhm.
could consider themselves a book critic. Because, especially if you read a specific genre all the time,
Mhm.
you know what should be in a book like that. You know
Mhm.
what is required.
To answer your question about if an avid reader could be considered a critic, um, again, it's what is your purpose for reading? Um, now, it all comes down to what is the purpose. Now, as a critic, it's okay to read and for the pleasure of it. Again, for those who don't know, I only do fiction because I because that's what I've been in, and more on the as personal reading, I do more fantasy, more like Robert Jordan, Tolkien, people like that is more what I'm drawn to, epic fantasy. And but again, now if I now I'd be reading it for okay, like with Tolkien, I would say okay, now he goes into way too much explanation. He he has tidbits of action inside of that, but he explains too much. I think for the average reader now.
Mm, I agree. I sometimes wonder if some of our classic authors would even be able to get published today with the way that they used to write. And today, the reader today really wants the action on the first page. They don't want the build
Mm-hmm.
up. And that's hard to do when you're world building a fantasy.
Yeah.
But I can see if that's what your chosen favorite genre to read in,
Mm-hmm.
how, and especially you, if you like, like epic fantasy, those are usually huge books,
Mm-hmm.
but they're meaty, so it gives you a lot to work with so far as a critique goes, or,
Mm-hmm.
for you to be able to get the whole feel of what that author is about.
Mm-hmm.
I can see where epic fantasy and the big meteor reads like the Robert Jordans and the George R. R. Martins, even um,
Mm-hmm.
Tolkien, that kind of book, would be really good foundation books to do what you do.
Mm-hmm.
Do you also do book reviews in addition to the book critic stuff?
Yes, actually, as a critic, you can read it. What I do is I read, and then I have a blog where I actually post my reviews, and that's where I do more of um, like what I find good about the book. Now, if somebody would say, like the author would ask me, okay, what is your opinion of things? What was your critique of it? That is where I would normally put okay, well, this is where the plot lines that I found or something like that, the negative critiquing. Now, the positive critiquing is usually what makes its way into my review because I want to promote the author as much as critique their work. So I want them to, okay, you've been published, now let's get your name out there. Which is why the books I critique and do review on are I focus on more small publishing houses. Like I'll give a shout out real quick to Hydra Publications. I've done right now two of theirs. Um, and it's just so small presses and self publishing I want to focus on because it gets their name out there as much as my own. So it's a
True.
dual meaning there, dual reward, I guess would be the word to say. So
Also, the smaller publishing houses have quite a tight knit community of author um, and industry pros. They work very closely together. Sometimes an author will be assigned an editor for their first book in perhaps a series, and
Mm-hmm.
that editor will be their editor throughout the entire series.
Mm-hmm.
Working with a small house is very beneficial in that respect that you get to know the people you work with, people
Mm-hmm.
who are providing services for your work to be, published and put out into the reading public. So kudos to you for working with small houses. Do you also work with independently published authors? Myself, I'm not with a small house anymore. I used to be, but they have
Mm-hmm.
all closed, and so I went out. I went on my own. If someone like me that just needed that extra set of eyes to test it for, for plausibility, for continuity,
Mm-hmm.
to catch the flaws that we ever, as authors, can never see. We can't see the forest for the trees ever.
Yeah.
How would someone? I mean, do you work with independently published authors?
Yes, I work. I do freelancing pretty much overall. Like such as Imaginarium is like a great way where I've gotten my, I guess you could say, clientele. Even though I'm 100% free, I do all my critiques and my reviews for free. So that way I can stay completely unbiased and I'm not worried about giving a good or bad review. Um, but yeah, I mean, I just go to shows, I give out my card and let them know, hey, look, I do critic work and I do reviews. I'd love to do your stuff, and kind of just organically goes from there.
We met at Imaginarium, and you had a
Mm.
nice booth set up. And I was
Sadly,
gonna
that was not
say,
just mine.
I was gonna say that was a question that I had was how do you keep bias out of what you do?
Mm.
Because if you're a big time, say, epic fantasy reader, and you already know the big names out there, and you're familiar with their work, and you know why they get paid the big bucks, basically because their books are
Mm-hmm.
just very, very well written.
Mm-hmm.
How do you keep bias out of your opinions? Because a small house or an independently published author, the book material may not be written that well. How can
Mm-hmm.
you have a kind of a scale there?
Um, well, first off, the big name authors really like Rowling or more modern people like Stephanie Meyer and people like that nowadays. It's really what I've noticed in the writing world is it's not necessarily by talent alone. It's also by just random circumstances. Like everybody who's a big Harry Potter fanatic knows Rowling's story. And so they know that it was really by chance that she was published with such a big house. Um, but yet again, just you as a critic or as a reviewer, you never want to just base your first opinion off of what house they're signed with, whether it be a small press or not. Because I've like I said with Hydra Publications, owner of the publication and also fantastic writer, Mr. Tony Acree. Now his books are smaller than what we would think of in the urban fantasy kind of occult field, but yet again, his writing is phenomenal. He is like on the top lists of Amazon and other sites as well. And I mean, again, it's not based off of who you're signed with; it's who you're um, what your actual talent is. Now, again, with that again going back to with me and the fantasy, um, I actually got to read a small house publication that was epic elven fantasy, which another shout out to Miss J.J. Sherwood, who has done the King's series. I did her first book of Kings or Pawns, and it was just so her writing was so phenomenal. Like she brought something new, and especially in that world where we have people like Tolkien and Jordan and Martin and everybody like that, you want to find, okay, what makes something new. Like also like in the world of vampires and werewolves. Now, me personally, I didn't enjoy the stuff that Meyer did, so to speak, because I'm personally of the view that vampires do not sparkle in the sun. Um, but you know, she brought something new to the world that we never understood. Like, and so that's what Meyer did, and that's what J.J. Sherwood did. We never had seen an epic fantasy that was strictly so based off of the politics of the culture of the elven culture. And she uses humans, but that's more of like an afterthought in her story. And so again, it's just bringing something new to the world of epic fantasy that we've never seen before. Now, to kind of go back to your original question of how do I stay unbiased with this, um, I go to instead of looking for, okay, what makes me intrigued as an individual, I go again. I look for plot holes. I look for, does it have a good plot? You know, basic literature is what I look for. Sadly enough, grammar has never been my strong suit, which is why I have an editor. Um, and so I look more for what's in the content of the story. Is this something that a person in the horror field would enjoy? I know that if I enjoyed it, somebody who is in um, the horror genre, if they want that and they see somebody that like me who is so focused on fantasy or sci-fi getting into a horror book, they're like, wow, if this guy never really does this and he loves this book so much, maybe there's actually something to this. So it's again critiquing is never or reviewing is never an exact science. So it's more of you just pick up a book, read it, and if you like it, you like it. If you don't, you don't.
Basically, like any reader.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Because I'm doing some extra reading myself for some contest stuff, and I'm stretching outside of my normal read, and
Mm-hmm.
I am fascinated with what's out there.
Exactly.
Some of
Same
these
here.
books are not new books. They're new to me, but they're not new per se. They're several years old. And I had no idea that these books were out there. Didn't know anything about the authors, didn't know anything about the subject matter. And I'm just like, these are fantastic. So I can kind of see where you're coming from. A good book is a good book is a good book. And you know it when you get one.
Exactly.
Let me ask you this. If somebody were listening to this show right now or viewing this show, hi y'all, how could they do what you do? You said you do it for free. I mean, it's not going to cost anyone anything. If they wanted to read and do a critique of it, or a review of it, they could do it for free also, right?
Yeah, again, it's also based off your relationships with the authors as well that you're doing the critiquing for. Now, there are some authors that, you know, will give you the book for free, the ebook. I especially get the ebooks for free. And sometimes I get the physical copy as well. But it's based off your relationship, because sometimes a $20 book I'll get for $5, or, you know, because they don't know me and they don't know the work I do, or, you know, they just know that I critique books, they'll be like, okay, well, I'll give you this book for the sale price. And I'm like, okay. And then, you know, as a starting out book critic, yeah, if I could speak,
we're having a good time tonight.
Woohoo! This is going to make one entertaining podcast, that's for sure. So again, it's about, like anything in the writing world, it's all about the relationships that you build. And so when you're first starting out, don't take it personally if somebody says, "Hey, it's a $15 book. I can only give it to you for the $15." Because, that's a building that relationship that maybe down the road, more than likely, they'll be like, they'll love the work that you do, they'll be appreciative. And so when they come out with something new or they have something else, they'll be like, I loved what you did. Here's another book. I mean, I've had that happen as well. So and I've actually gotten some audiobooks out of it as well. They're like, this one's on Audible, go ahead and listen to it. So it's again, just based off of relationships and where those relationships take you.
That's really cool. And I think that surely there's someone in the audience who's thinking about this. And trust me, as an author, always needing reviews. There's a wide open market for you guys. If you're interested in reviewing books, man, get in touch with SC because he can tell you how to do it, first of all. But authors need Authors need reviewers. We need reviewers all the time. I'm having a steady stream of work coming out. This year alone, 3 books. And so, we always need reviews. We need people that have your skills. So it's fascinating information that you're giving us, SC, and I really appreciate it. Now, you did mention that you are a writer also. And so
Correct.
I want to talk a little bit about your writing and what you're doing with it and what your plans and your hopes for the future are with it, because I think you're going to touch quite a lot of nerves with what you're doing. So tell us about your collection that you're working on.
Okay, my collection is going to be a collection of 20 to 25 short stories centered around the mental health world. As when people ask what kind of genre am I going to write, I say mental health fiction. Because they are stories to protect the people that I know who have gone through them, or myself. The identities. I write generic stories of experiences, and so it will encapsulate the idea of
so it's
what
almost
the
kind of like
is.
fictionalized a memoir almost.
Just about.
That's cool.
So yeah, and so that's what I'm working on. I'm actually on the 3rd short story of that right now, where it's the working title right now is The Unseen War, and it's about the war that every soldier has coming back. I mean, we hear about PTSD, we hear about what goes on, but it's, I think with a lot of mental health, that unless it affects us personally, we go, well, okay, that sucks that you're going through that, and, I'll pray for you or whatever, if that's your religious prerogative. And then you'll go, and it's like you're not thinking about it. Now, but yet again, I want to bring true awareness of what it really is to live with such things. Because for me, again, with the PTSD, I actually served in the military for a short time and did a small tour in Iraq. And so when I came home, I had those struggles, the unseen war that is within each person. Like the first sentence in The Unseen War is, you've heard it said that you can take the soldier out of the war, but you can't take the war out of the soldier. And so it's true. I mean, every soldier that has served in a war zone struggles with coming home and living in a peaceful time to some extent. So, and that's just one of the areas.
So this collection that you're writing, how many books did you say? How many short stories did you say would be in it?
About 20 to 25. I'm shooting for a minimum of 20, but if more come to me before then, because by April or May, I want to have all my stuff edited, and then that way I can take the time in the summer to just focus on the formatting, the way I want to print it, do I want trade back, or, the trade copy, whatever form of the printing that I want. And then that way by October, the next Imaginarium, if you're not going, you need to go ahead and sign up.
Yes.
Imaginarium is awesome. Also, I will be there.
Entertheimaginarium.com. You guys go check it out.
Exactly. And I know the pioneer of that, Steven Zimmer, real quick, shout out to him. He would love to have you, and he would love to just add you. We are a family of writers, and it's a fantastic time. So if you're a writer, come. If you're a reader, if you're just enthusiastic about everything books, again, come.
Very much a
But
creative conference.
exactly, which I'll touch up here on a separate topic here in a minute, real quick. But to go back, it's 20 to 25, and I want to have them published, and so it's going to be everything from PTSD to attention deficit disorder to attention hyperness, ADHD, and it's also more, the more personal stuff to me is the depression and suicide awareness. And so because I think, we look at people, again, we look at people with these mental health, the disorders, I say very loosely,
situations, mental health situations.
Yeah, situations. There we go. That's a little bit better. Again, it's to bring the true, okay, this is what it really is to live with these things. And so, it's, you're getting kind of, in a sense, a first-hand account of, because all my stories are first person. So it'll be very personal for the reader to see, okay, the character is internalizing this. This is not something that an onlooker is doing, because that's what I think the rest of the world is we're onlookers. And so we don't see it personalized or internalized for us. So seeing a story and seeing that first person view, I think, is really, really beneficial to the awareness part.
I think that's a wonderful endeavor. I'm very pleased for you about that, and I look forward to the time when that comes out, because then I'm going to want you to come back on the show so we can talk about it more fully, and also we can give people a directive where to go and get it. Listening to you talk about it, I can tell it's a true work of your heart. And I think it'll be very beneficial to a reader out there who experiences some of this. Traditionally, how it's happened in my life and in the lives of other writers is you'll write a story and you will research thoroughly some subject matter. We'll just use the topic of cancer, for example. You'll research things like chemotherapy and treatments and things like this and what people experience when they go through that. And you'll put it in your book. And then somewhere, at some point, a reader will come back and say to you, you nailed it. And that's why what I anticipate you having in your future is somebody coming back after reading your collection saying you nailed it. And I can't wait for you to contact me that day and say, it happened. Because it will. And it'll be the best feeling you've ever had to know that something that you wrote, something that you created, touched the life of someone that you really intended to touch. And they were brave enough to contact you and say, thank you for that.
Oh, yeah.
That's always a really defining moment as a writer. So kudos to you. You're doing so good. I'm so happy for you. And I do hope you'll come back with that book when it comes out. And I'll be the first person to come over to your table at Imaginarium 2017 and check it out. Well, listen, we're getting down to the last few minutes of the show, and I always like to get my authors to say something at the end of the show that they would like to express to an aspiring author. But seeing as how the book that is your dream book here that you're working on has so much really sensitive stuff in it, things that people... I've never had PTSD. I've never dealt with any of those, ADHD, unless I have an adult onset form of it of some kind, which I wouldn't be surprised. But I've never had those kinds of mental health situations in my life. So I cannot be the person to reach out to an audience and say, you know what? This is the information I'd like for you to have that I know. So give somebody that may be experiencing that right now, throw them a bone. Tell them something you think they need to know.
Okay. first off, you're not alone. That's with mental health situations, especially with depression, PTSD, and everything like that. You're not alone, and I want to encourage you on that. If you do feel that way, get with somebody that you trust enough to talk about this stuff with. It is very imperative that you talk and that you seek help. I know from my own personal experience that the more we push it under the rug, the worse and worse it gets. So please go and talk to somebody about it and seek help. Because it takes bravery to talk about this stuff, but I guarantee you'll feel better because somebody understands to some degree. It's not just you in the dark. Now, to as you said, you like to have this time for writers to give things to writers. I'll say a quick thing about, if you're wanting to do this, if you're wanting to get into the more mental health stories, if you're going through that, just use your own experience, because don't worry about, pleasing somebody. And again, one of my favorite sayings from one of my publisher friends that I've met is, as a writer, you write and you make no apologies. And so, especially in this field, and for those who have not struggled with the things that you're wanting to write about, say if you're a person that wants to write about, bipolar, and emphasize that and have one of your characters have that mental health situation in any book, really talk to individuals. Just don't read it, because you can read books about anything and not really grasp what it really is. So really just reach out, be brave in your situation, and get out and ask the hard questions. Because again, you'll be finding out information, and then you will be helping somebody because you are showing an interest in them as well. So
the internet is a wonderful tool, but it's not the end-all, do-all, be-all. And we should always remember that human interaction, face-to-face human interaction, is the best way of all ways to glean information, to share information. We have to be in touch with one another as humans. We can't do everything on the internet. It's just not going to work.
Nope.
Well, SC, it has been so much fun having you on Writer Groupie tonight on episode 71, and I will look forward to chatting with you real soon. We're gonna have to get together about this book now. I want to know. You're gonna have to stay in touch with me and keep me up to date on all the details of when, where, what, and how.
Okay, I definitely will. And again, just come to Imaginarium for those who are viewing this. Come to Imaginarium. It's awesome. Also, I'm not going to give out too many details because I don't have any fully, but I will be a guest panelist this next Imaginarium, and so I will be covering possibly poetry, because I have also been doing poetry as well, which that will be for another time. But yeah, just come out, see me, and see everybody else.
Thank you so much for coming on the show. I'm going to wrap it up, but you sit tight for just a minute and I'll chat with you again, okay?
All right.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Writer Groupie. For booking information, show notes, and more, visit writergroupie.net.